Hello and welcome to Investing for the Long Term with Judith Mackenzie and Rosemary Banyard. Judith is partner and head of Downing Fund Managers, and Rosemary is an award-winning fund manager who manages the VT Downing Unique Opportunities Fund. In the previous episode, Judith and Rosemary shared how they construct a portfolio of stocks and how they manage them for the long term. And during this episode, Judith and Rosemary delve into the intricacies of a day in the life of a fund manager. They discuss their roles and responsibilities and share insights into their typical weeks, which, as you can appreciate, can vary greatly and can be unpredictable due to market announcements. They highlight the challenges posed by regulatory demands and the importance of long-term investing. They reflect on their most rewarding moments and provide advice for aspiring fund managers. This was another great insight into how two seasoned fund managers think and how they view investing for the long term. And just before we get started, please remember that all opinions and information are for educational purposes only and do not constitute investment advice. Investing carries a high level of risk and is not right for everyone. Always do your own research and seek financial advice from a regulated financial advisor in your country before making any financial decisions. With that being said, let's get started. Hello guys, good to see you. Episode 8, the final one of the season.
Good to see you, Lee. Hello, Lee.
How do you feel now we've come to the end, the final one, the day in the life of a fund manager?
Nostalgic.
Relieved?
I don't know, actually. I think when we started off doing this with a degree of trepidation and a degree of nervousness, now it feels like just sitting having a good fireside chat. So, yeah, enjoyed it.
Good. Perhaps this is the one that we've been anticipating the most, the day in the life of a fund manager. So I thought we'd start off with, what are the roles and responsibilities of a fund manager? Anyone who has a job or a career, and we all have our roles and responsibilities. So what are they for a fund manager?
Well, I would say at its simplest, the clue is in the title. The job is to manage a fund, and obviously they're taking in people's money, often their life savings, a part of. And our job in the equity space is to find a range of investments that will hopefully make people money and fit in with the objectives that we set out so that they get what they expect to get in the fund. That's quite important, whether that's around the geography, around the number of holdings, around the size of the companies they're investing in. It could be all manner of objectives and framing the fund. But the essential job is to select really good investments and then monitor them. And that's a big part of the job. And then sometimes to, exit them and find others. So the core job is, in some ways, it's a research role because we're constantly looking at existing and potential new companies to invest in.
I'd agree, Rosemary. It's actually really quite simple in terms of our objectives. In my case, it's to invest in up to 40 companies on AIM, the junior market of the stock exchange, invest for the long term and create a gain for our investors. That's it. And I think when the joy of having to do appraisals for our team and the fund managers is one of the easiest because you just say performance, what have you given shareholders? That's it. I think it's probably one of the more simple jobs to be measured against your KPI because it is so transparent. That's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. And I think it's a bad thing when people focus it on very short-term time frames. We're really looking at 5 years and over for being able to generate a return for investors. So I think our investors know what we do and how we do it. And then it's about, I think, the other stuff around it. And that other stuff includes communicating what we do to shareholders, both current and potential new ones, the portfolio management that Rosemary's talked about. And then there's now also regulatory stuff that we have to deal with. No doubt we'll come on to it as well. But it's actually quite simple. And we get judged against our peers. So it's brutal, but simple.
So what does an average week look like for you then? What's a standard week? You're all rolling your head and rolling your eyes now.
That's the great thing. There's not a standard week. And even this morning, Rosemary and I woke up to an announcement that we weren't expecting. So my plan for the first hour and a half of the day was completely skewed as opposed to what I thought I was going to be doing. I was speaking to a management team asking why they just put out a profits warning, which wasn't the best thing. But you can have a plan for your week. It doesn't tend to follow. But if you try to think about how we might structure it, I suppose there's three main sections. One is the portfolio, and I think we spend a lot of time, maybe compared to some other fund managers, because we don't have a high turnover. We spend a lot of time thinking and looking at the portfolio, reading about it, maybe trying to find other reference points about portfolio companies. So that portfolio element takes up quite a lot of reading time, I suspect. Then there's the new idea generation, which will take up maybe a little bit of time. That could be meeting companies or whatever. And then there's the marketing and communications aspect that I talked about as well. So you do get set periods of frenetic activity, and that tends to be when the companies are making either their interim or full year announcements, and they'll be publishing results and reporting accounts. So there's quite a lot of collateral to read, and they tend to be in March and April and also September time. So they can be quite busy periods where you might be meeting 2 or 3 companies a day. Try not to do that. And then you've got to go back and think about what they've said, not just reading what they've put on paper, but really looking at the innuendo of what they might have said and reading into what they've written, going back to your model, updating it. Yeah, there's quite a lot of work in that period, or those 2 periods in the year. And then between times, doing lots of reading and researching new ideas. And a lot of it is, as Rosemary said at the start, it's a research job as much as anything else.
Yeah, and then I'd add to that, I totally agree with everything Judith said, that we've got all these other things that we need to fit in around that. And so the communications piece is important. So we typically are, for example, putting out a monthly fact sheet, which has some text in it that we write, which is just keeping people basically updated on what's happening in the portfolios. We have semi-annual and annual reports where we're having to write some commentary. We've also do quite a bit of writing, actually, because we'll be putting out, for example, thought pieces to maybe pick on an aspect of the fund we're running, just to engage people in how we think. So there's a lot of writing and also presenting. So we might be just presenting internally to our sales force. We might be going out and presenting to existing or potential investors. So that's one whole piece. And then, as Judith alluded to, there's the regulatory piece, which it wouldn't surprise listeners to know is growing in terms of the time that it takes up. And all the sort of training that we have to do, the online training modules that we're required to do every year. And there are lots of other things that come on us that we have to understand or respond to. And then there's the voting. I think we may have talked about this on a previous episode, but we also have governance responsibilities. And so we get requests through from all our investee companies to vote on their annual general meeting resolutions. And that involves reading the accounts, considering how we're going to vote, and then actually exercising the vote. So there are a lot of other things going on besides the core.
Just listening to you there, it seems like there are elements that are structured. There's an awful lot that requires your self-motivation. There seems to be a lot of elements that comes from you have to drive yourselves to and think creatively, think on your feet due to different situations and events.
Yeah, no, I think it's only when Rosemary was beginning to list some of these things off, I'd almost forgotten that you just do it as part of you fit it in somehow. I don't know how you do it, but yeah, you've got to be able to project manage yourself, I think, which isn't easy, and adapt when you get something, a curveball thrown at you.
Like a profit warning first thing in the morning.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that one.
But I think it's also, it's also the appeal of the job is that every day is different. You don't know what's coming, and it can often be good news, not always bad. So there's never a chance to get bored.
That's very true. And Rosemary, you had the same start as I did as an analyst. And as an analyst, they call it the sell side. So you're selling to people like us, a fund manager, and you've got stock ideas and you get on the phone to a fund manager. But it used to be very structured to that period first thing in the morning. And just for listeners' benefit, so at 7 o'clock in the morning, companies tend to put out their news for the day. So whether it's profit warning or an upgrade or results or whatever, they come out at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the market's not open at that point. So the market opens at 8 o'clock. So you've got this hour-long period where you can consume as much data as you want, and you can form an opinion as to what you might think. Now, we're pretty slow investors, so I don't think I really have... I might have done in the past, but I would probably very rarely read something between 7 and 8 and then go, right, press a button and sell stock at 8 o'clock, because we want to digest it, want to speak to the management team and get a proper view. And we're slow investors, I think, in a positive way. But in the days of being an analyst, you were consuming that data in as fast a way as possible and then getting on the phone to institutions to give your view. So I think having that kind of background on doing that back in the day means that I probably learned quite quickly how to disseminate information and interpret it and try and prioritize as well as to what's important and what's not, because you could get absolutely swamped if you saw those, I don't know how many announcements there might be a day in the market, 300-400 maybe. Some are relevant, some aren't. Our job is very much, especially as an analyst back in the day, was to sift that information. So I think that kind of discipline that both of us had at the start probably means that we might be relatively good at knowing what's important and what's not.
Listening to you, is wondering where you sleep and where you eat, what you've
My-
described.
My husband often wonders the same thing, actually.
Yeah, I'm guessing the standard 8 till 4 day just doesn't, it's not a thing for you guys.
No, but that's what's great about it. That's the fun. That's the fun.
Do you have teams? I've heard Rosemary there mention a sales team. Do you have other people that support you in different aspects of it?
So it's the UK equity team. We're a small house, we're a boutique, and that's what we want to be. We don't want to be a raft of hundreds of fund managers and analysts. The beauty of the way we do it, I think, is that we do have quite a small, tight team. So the UK managers, there's 5 of us. Is that right? Yes. Then there's another 4 managers a couple are European smaller companies, then another couple are in multi-managers. So Rosemary's got somebody that works with her, and I've got somebody that works with me as well. Not massive teams, but some really good sounding boards across the Downing Fund Managers team as a whole, and also with our own sidekicks.
It's really important, actually, to have, even in a small firm, to have somebody that's a sounding board and a challenge. It's something I learned a long while ago, really when I was at Schroders, actually, was that because we make mistakes about investments, of course we do, and we buy things and they don't turn out to be what we hoped. So they might have gone down in value and we've lost people money, potentially. At that point, particularly, it's really helpful to have somebody to go and look at it separate from your buying decision in a way and take a dispassionate view about whether to double or quit. And that's one important aspect of having somebody else, that because it's much easier to retreat from something in a team than digging in on your own ideas.
Yeah, very much. It's really important. But you also want to be able to do it in an environment where it's without ego, because I have been in situations with investment committees or even other fund managers where it's a bit of gameplay where somebody's trying to score points, and that's not what we have here, because that's not going to get the best client outcome. So really it's fund managers that can work together and in a slightly seeing the different side of the argument and being able to present it to your co-fund manager in a way that is fair and factual. And in the end, it's always an opinion. So it's respecting other people's opinions as well as you go through that process.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because one of the aspects of a high-performing team, isn't it? The ability to respectfully disagree and come to an amicable outcome. Yeah, having that network around you is very important, I'm sure. I've noticed as well on a few of these calls that you're working from home. How does the working from home aspect work for you? Is that a part of the job that you enjoy?
Yes.
Next question.
I probably spend 2 to 3 days either in the office or out seeing companies or out seeing investors, doing part of the job that I do like seeing companies in the flesh. I do like seeing investors in the flesh as well. So that means you're out and about a little bit. But the reality is the real work gets done here at home. It's lovely being in the office and seeing my colleagues, but I'll just chatter away and probably get a good sounding board on some of our investments or whatever. But I think the real grunt work gets done when you're going back to what Rosemary said at the start. A lot of our job is research. So you need to read, and it's very difficult to do in a noisier environment.
I work from home pretty full time, and that's been true for about 8 years now. And it dates to a time when I had some responsibilities with aging parents locally. So, there was some other reasons to do it, just to save time on commuting. But I sort of got used to it. So I think it is, as Judith says, it's important to meet companies in the flesh. I think it's very important, if you've not met the company or the management team before, to do that. We all know, don't we, that we have an awful lot of signals that are given off in interpersonal sort of meetings in face-to-face. But when you've known a company and the management for many years, I think you can quite happily take advantage of modern technology to catch up. And in a strange way, the COVID has made that much easier to do.
So on top of all what you described earlier, you also do a fair bit of travelling up and down the country as well, visiting these companies.
Yeah, and investors. Our investors are right the way through the UK, and we'll do local roadshows, whether it be in Scotland or north of England or whatever. So yeah, we try and be focused about it. And when our sales chaps and ladies are taking us out, we're trying to get them to hopefully put as many meetings in, good meetings, in the diary, as opposed to just maybe doing 1 or 2 on a certain day. So we're trying to get the diaries as full as possible. Doesn't always work, but that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, if anyone was interested in becoming a fund manager, we might have some helpful tips. But now we might be putting them off with the amount of work you.
Yeah, well, I suppose the beauty is I don't view it as work. I sit down and
Oh.
companies set of report accounts. I'm delighted to be able to close the door and do that. So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some stuff that I just would love to see the back of.
But it is hard work. You're rightly to observe that. It's unremitting. And you also have to have the ability to cope with the fact that the job is never done. There's always something more to read. There's always another model to update. There's always something else to learn. If you're the sort of person that likes to tick things off and that it's all done, then this might not be the role for you.
Throughout this podcast series, I can clearly tell that you're both doing what you love to do and you get paid for it as well. So that's the holy grail, isn't it? Find what you love, and if you can get paid for it, you've won the lottery, so to speak. But Judith, I noticed there you mentioned that there is some frustrations, and we've talked about the good side of it here. What are some of the challenges and the frustrations, if any?
Oh yeah, don't worry. Yeah, we've got some. The negative part of the job, and I think we touched on it earlier, is that regulation aspect. I don't mind working and getting an outcome that hopefully is ultimately going to benefit shareholders, but I think there's no correlation really between the amount of regulation and the impact or positive impact on shareholders. We've seen that increase quite substantially, and I think we get asked what I would regard as quite stupid questions, and that's about liquidity. We touched on liquidity before in previous episodes, and really how portfolios get managed. And that thing that is called risk is only one thing, and that's a permanent loss of capital. So it really annoys me that we look at things like volatility and share prices going up and down when actually it doesn't really matter, does it? That's not really what's going to be affecting the shareholder. I get frustrated about that, and that's a bit of a hobby horse for me, I think. And I'd like to see it reduce significantly.
Amen
Seems
to
like too much
that.
time.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I guess with use as well, having a 5-year minimum horizon, during that period, there's going to be volatility, isn't there?
Of course it is.
The market's going to go through cycles.
Yeah. And so to be, held to account for a 1-3-year track record is just crazy, and it's making investors focus on the wrong thing. That's, I think, the most frustrating thing.
I guess this question here probably has already just been answered. If there is one thing you could change that you do on a regular basis, what would that be?
I think it would be
Yeah.
less, I alluded to it, more relevant training, regulatory training. This is courses that we're required to tick off every year, and less CPD, continuous professional development, which again is quite prescribed in terms of the amount of hours you're supposed to do. And if I take the latter, I'll get the numbers wrong, Judith might correct me, but we're supposed to do something like 35 hours of CPD, of which 21, is it, have to be structured. And we've had endless discussions about what's structured and unstructured. The thing is that if you do our job, you're constantly listening to a webcast or reading a book or listening to a webinar of a company you've not looked at before, or it's what you do. And so somewhere in the design of this CPD, there's a complete misunderstanding somewhere of what the job entails.
Yeah. I could be really good on my CPD data and filing it away. I've probably been pretty useless in neglecting my fund management duties. I think the regulator needs to be careful as to what they wish for. I think if I could change one thing, and maybe it's all interlinked, but I think shareholders and investors are being almost forced to be short-termist in the way that the regulator's making them look at risk. And I think that's really dangerous. It's going to create the wrong behaviours in fund management and actually then really risky outcomes for shareholders. So that's the irony. And I think that stems from the top all the way down, and including government fiscal policy and a lack of understanding as to the importance of smaller companies in the UK, and again being short-termist and not investing for the future. Yeah, that we just need to have a longer-term investment mentality to get the best returns, and cutting out regulation the way it is at the moment.
I think what you've just touched on there is a much deeper, complex problem with how the government operates and views things, in particular around the UK share market, isn't it?
Yeah.
Broader, complex problems in there. I think what we need to do is get this episode in front of them so they can hear what a fund manager does from a day-to-day basis.
I'll be sending it to both parties.
Sending it to the, yeah. I mean, this has been really interesting. It's been fascinating, actually. Really enjoyed it. As you both now look back on your multi-decade career, what's perhaps been your most proudest moment?
On you go, Rosemary.
Well,
I find this one quite difficult.
Yeah, I find this one quite difficult. I don't think there's one moment, but I guess what I'm really happy about, and so this goes back to 18 years at Schroders, so it's a continuous sort of record that I'm describing here over quite a long time, and managing some money for pension funds. And there's one in particular that I'm thinking about, which I think are delivered something like 14% per annum returns over 14 years. And that kind of thing gives me immense satisfaction because it was great for the company and the pensioners. In fact, the chief executive of the company in question, when I moved out of Schroders, he invested personally in my new fund, which kind of underlines the point slightly. Yeah. So is that kind of long-term achieving genuine benefits for other people, which is what we're about.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, bang on, Rosemary. I think there's certainly not been any one moment in my career that I could pinpoint, but when I think of the times that I have been proud of, it's when, for me, I invest in portfolios for typically people that have retired and are looking to protect from inheritance tax by investing in these AIM companies. And in Downing, I've been doing that now for 13 years and many years before it. But I had the privilege of sitting in front of one of our investors, who's a retired doctor up in Kendal, and in his house, with his ill wife in the room next door, and he took out his portfolio and he showed the returns that we generated, and he thanked me, and I thought, that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's nice, isn't it? That's the reward, isn't it? That it's helping people, isn't it? Helping people, as big a reward as the financial aspect.
Yeah, it is. I think, it goes back to the very first question. What is our objective? And that is to create value in the mandates that we have over the long term. That's it, simple.
Do you do any other additional commitments? What do you do outside of working for Downing or as Downing fund managers? Is there anything you do outside of that? Any charities, any other commitments, things like that?
I'm involved with a couple of charities.
I thought you would be, Rosemary.
It's quite important to give back when you get to
Yeah.
certain age and stage in life, like I have when my kids have grown up and things. One of them actually is a very small local charity that I helped set up about 15 years ago, which actually buys properties, houses and halls which are used by local churches who we let them rent at below market because Cambridge, where I live, is very expensive. That's quite a distinct small thing. But the other charity that I'm involved is on a rather bigger scale, and I'm involved with as a trustee of HMS Victory, Nelson's flagship, which obviously is down in Portsmouth and is undergoing a massive refurbishment programme because the ship had got into quite a poor state due to using the wrong types of wood in previous refurbishment projects, which turned to mush. A non-technical phrase. And that's really interesting because I learn an awful lot about the repair of a 300-year-old wooden ship. But I'm there because of my investment experience and sit on the investment committee. And probably not surprisingly, some of the people on the trustee board are very senior former members of the Royal Navy, which is a bunch of people I'd never otherwise get to meet. So yeah, I give, but I also get back on that.
Yeah.
So I sit as chair of the Quoted Companies Alliance, which is the lobbying body for UK smaller companies into government and other bodies, and the regulator. Please, my good friends. So yeah, that takes up a little bit of time. But again, like Rosemary, you're giving, it's a not-for-profit organisation, so we're not getting anything out of it financially, but I get a lot out of it from a personal point of view because it's great actually. We've got over 300 members, so I get to meet our members, which is the voice of the UK smaller company, which takes back into the job that we do. I get to meet politicians. It's just and get hopefully influence the direction of investment in the UK smaller company market. So that could be the new British ISA, it could be persuading pension funds to invest in UK smaller companies. So I actually feel as though I'm alongside some really good people where we're having an influence and changing some of the things that I was just moaning about. So that makes a big difference. I also sit on the board of Downing itself. It's quite interesting. I help running a company as well. It's not easy. But that is a great insight into how fund management businesses work as well, and the nuts and bolts of it. And again, sit alongside some pretty good people. So it's a good learning curve.
Yeah, I've always considered myself quite a busy person, but listening to you two, I've got a lot of improving to catch up to you two.
It's about prioritising, Lee, honestly. Yeah, you've got to say no to stuff.
Luckily, you didn't say no to this, so thank you.
I know, and you keep rolling out other episodes, so yeah, well done. Normally I'd say no to that.
I've already presented season 2 to you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been brilliant. It's been really insightful, really enjoyable. And if anyone listening now still fancies becoming a fund manager, how can someone follow in your footsteps? Where would they start?
This is such a difficult one. For instance, I don't think the 22 or 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old me would get a job in fund management now. We've talked about it in previous episodes. A lot of it is a little bit of luck and a little bit of judgment thrown in as well. But I think it's very difficult to get a job in fund management. It certainly is changing because it used to be that if you didn't have a certain degree from a certain university, the door wouldn't be open. I think that has changed a lot, fortunately, over the years. I think it's about showing a passion for investing. And I know that's quite difficult to do at an early age, but hopefully with this, we can educate people a little bit more on what a fund manager actually does and what the benefits are too. I do see that as our responsibility to let people know what the job is about. Downing itself, we do take on graduates. We don't have a graduate program because they're really quite difficult to run well. We do take on interns, and we do take on folk in their years out, their sandwich year, if it's a university that's doing a year or 8-10 months in business. We're probably not very structured in the way that we do it. It's a little bit ad hoc. I also like to home grow our talent, and ideally people that have shown a passion for what they're doing or fund management that might be coming in and doing a job that's completely different. We've got one chap that was a fund accountant that came pretty much straight from school. He had no qualifications, and I'm proud to say that Downing supported him through doing his fund accounting exams. He's now working in our team. He's an absolute whiz in a spreadsheet, bright as anything. And he's been coming along to some company meetings with me, and he's asking more insightful questions than I am. It's great. Not difficult maybe, but it's great. And I'd like to think that there's probably a couple of members in our team that have started off on maybe the admin side of fund management, but they'll probably, I think, be better managers than we are in the next, 5-10 years or so. And my colleague Nick, who's my equal, we took him on 7 or 8 years ago as a kind of junior analyst, and he's now a co-fund manager with as much responsibility as I have. I really like being able to work and nurture people that show a talent for fund management and a desire to do it as well. But that's not to say it's an easy route in. It's not there's no passport, there's no magic bullet, I don't think.
I think that's right. There's no magic bullet. And for context, there's a lot of pressures on the fund management industry at the moment, and some of the big houses are laying people off. And so it's probably a particularly difficult time at the moment to get in, as it were, in a somewhat conventional route by applying to be an analyst or whatever, because there are some analysts being laid off. I think probably one does need to think a bit outside the box and be willing to start in maybe some other role, of which there are plenty in the business.
I suppose it's like most high-level industries, it's very hard, very competitive, but just getting your foot in the door is a start, isn't it? Just, as you say there, getting in with said company, and perhaps maybe you can gravitate towards the area that you want to work in most by demonstrating the traits that you've described there, Judith.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. We've come to the end of not just this episode, but this whole season, which started at 6, ended up at 8. So thank you for that.
Compounding effect.
Yeah, the compounding effect. There you go. Growth, added value. It's been absolutely excellent, as I've said many times. Really appreciate you both for doing this. We have mentioned season 2, so hopefully keep an eye out for that coming out later in the year. Yeah, and as we always finish each episode off, we're going to finish off with a book to read or a podcast to listen to. Who wants to go first? Or some company accounts. We've had a few company accounts as well.
I hesitated with this one for various reasons. So I'm just going to recommend a book. I hesitated for various reasons because it's written by a friend of ours. It's only recently out, so it's probably only in hardback at the moment. And it's not exactly an investment book. And it's also quite downbeat. There's 4 reasons not to read it. But I felt that sometimes it's important just to read around topics. So anyway, the book is called Vassal State. And it's by a guy called Angus Hanton. Bit of a depressing read in that it's talking about the...
You're not selling it, Rosemary.
No, I know.
This is why.
Yeah, this is why. Because it's talking about the takeover of a lot of really excellent British companies by private equity and by corporates, particularly American corporates. It's also talking about how in Britain, a lot of our day-to-day lives involve paying rent to American companies. It's a recent example which bring it alive is I just went on holiday for a few days up north and I booked an Airbnb. And this was a British couple renting from a British couple, but the company in the middle was obviously American and is taking 17% rent, some from them and some from us, because actually, well, I hadn't realised this when they put their rate into the system, it gets marked up for me. I'm paying more and they're getting quite a lot less. I think it's relevant to investing because it does get you thinking about business models, which we've talked about before, and the attraction of sitting there in the middle with a platform, particularly if it's a market leader and you can make a lot of money. So I think in a weird way, although its purpose is perhaps one thing, it does help with thinking about investment. And it also it made me just think again about still how many excellent businesses we have listed in London, which we still can invest in.
Great share. You actually started off, I wasn't quite sold on it, but actually you've finished quite strongly there. It sounds a really interesting book. So, yeah.
I can tell you it's £18.09 on Amazon and it's on its way to me now. So that's a good recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah. No, the link for that will be below in the show notes. So if you do want to go and purchase it, just scroll down, it'll be there.
I feel a bit of a cheat now, actually.
You could just say the Fund Your Retirement podcast.
I couldn't.
Go and listen to episode 1 again.
I know. So it's the last of the series, and there's an election coming up, isn't there, in a few weeks? So I'm just going to cheat. But I do think it's also relevant, even though it's a sitcom. And there's probably quite a few listeners who won't be of an age that they'll have listened to it because it's from the 1980s. But I still think it's got many parallels to today. It's set in the private office of I'm going to see if Rosemary can guess this now, if she hasn't already. Set in the private office of a British cabinet
Is it
minister.
Yes, Prime Minister?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's a brilliant show. That's a documentary. That's not a...
It is. I know. Thank you. See, I'm not quite as frivolous as you think. First of all, as a minister, and then he becomes PM after it, Jim Hacker, in this fictional department, which I think is the Department of Admin Affairs or something in Whitehall. And it follows his career. And what's crazy about it is that it shows his struggles to try and formulate and enact policy or affect any kind of change against the might of the civil service and his permanent secretary. And it just shows that actually politics is just a bit like wading through treacle. And whenever I speak to politicians, and which I do get a chance to do now with my role in the QCA, I always mention yes, Minister and yes, Prime Minister to them and ask if that really is what the inner workings of government are like. And to a man and woman, they always give a wry smile and say, yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. So it's very well written. And although it's back in, I think it was 1980 to 1988 and 16 episodes or something, there are so many similarities to things that are happening or have happened over the last couple of years.
That is a brilliant way to finish this series because that is a great show. That is a really good show. So funny, so funny.
It is good.
Such share. That's it. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
See you in season 2.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, that's it for today, and indeed for season 1. We hope you enjoyed this 8-part series and will join us for season 2, where Judith and Rosemary will once again peel back the veil of the fund management world. If you'd like to learn more about Rosemary and Judith and Downing, please visit www.downingfundmanagers.co.uk. All the links are just below in the show notes. And don't forget, please do subscribe and leave us a comment. It really does help us out. We really hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to speaking to you in the next one. Hope you have a great day, and bye for now.